Welcome to The Piv Out with Rocio, the podcast. A podcast about the juxtaposition between emotional and mental stability during your season of pivouting. I am so happy and thankful you're here. I'm beyond excited to connect. Make sure you have something to take notes because here we're going to school.
Hola, mi gente. Hi, guys. What a week. Has it only been a week? I don't know when you're listening to this episode, but last Tuesday was election day here in the United States. I know I have some friends who listen overseas, and thank you for your thoughts and prayers. But anyway, in local news, Trump has become the United States president-elect. And with this election result, there are many firsts. The one that I will point out is the fact that he was president. He lost his run to have a second term. And I believe that I am correct in saying that he is the first person president to win after a loss in between. So he's the first president to serve or what will be serving his second term with a gap in between. Better yet, I will not talk about the results of this election. I will not go into detail about my opinions. We all have our own opinions. I stand firm on mine, but as it pertains to this episode, he's literally the definition of a slasher. Today's episode is entitled The Slasher. He's a celebrity turned president. No matter what you think of him, his mere existence, let alone the win, is further confirmation of something that I've always known, and you know it well, and it's a saying, and it was brought to my attention most recently. Whatever the mind can conceive, the mind, or in this case, the man, the woman, the human can achieve. Yes, he came from wealth. Yes, he is a celebrity. But the one thing you can't take from him is the fact that he saw the position and went straight for it with no filter, no breaks. He was laser focused. We can go on and on about slashers, which is the title, as I mentioned, of this episode, which in full transparency, I got from Bishop T.D. Jakes, who is a pastor and a motivational speaker and a producer and a slasher, one of many. I remember I was on the treadmill a few years ago. I think it was 2017 because the book had just come out. And I was reading his book, which I would recommend to anyone, one of his many books, and it's entitled Soar. Build your vision from the ground up. Soar as in soar like an eagle, soar like a bird, soar like a superhero. In the book, he talks about being a slasher. Be who you are, not what they call you. And in life, there are moments, for me at least, that I read something, I hear something, whether it's a quote, and I've mentioned this before, whether it's script, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a service, whether it's a movie that I read, I see, I absorb, and it just stays with me. And I carry this with me. And ironically, or not ironically, but I would say more divinely, God had that message for me at that time. I was in a space where I was working at Ellen DeGeneres, as I've mentioned on the podcast previously, one of my many, I would say, quote unquote, corporate jobs, professions. And I just wasn't happy. I was bringing in business. I was closing deals left and right, but the toxic work environment, and honestly, that was one of many things, but the toxic work environment was not fulfilling me personally. I was plagued with a sense of unfulfillment. I was sick of making rich people richer. And, it's like, of course, what I do is making people money. I help them build their brands. And It's a business model building in a sense. But at the time, and still sometimes very heavily, it was a feeling of making someone richer who, in my opinion, didn't deserve it. Which in itself is a heavy statement, and that's a whole nother topic. But we all deserve wealth. We all deserve financial wealth. We all deserve emotional wealth, mental wealth, sexual wealth, love wealth, various different areas of wealth, you name it. Nonetheless, this statement stuck with me. The slasher, this title, this identifier stuck with me, and I took it and added it to a piece of defining me. While I'm always transparent about what I know and what I don't know, I knew and know that I am able to do many, many things very, very well. I just couldn't get out of the mindset of, what do you do? I'm in marketing. What do you specialize in? Branding and licensing. When really it started for me very early on in my career with Puff, Diddy, whatever you guys want to call him. I know he is in a lot of trouble right now, but I cannot erase my very real, and a lot of my good friends, very real business building experience that we had with working with Puff. Whether you worked at Sean John, at Bad Boy, though it was almost 20 years ago or more than 20 years ago, I will always refer to that time and my time there as boot camp. I was buying advertising. I was planning and overseeing photo shoots. I was managing marketing campaigns. I was having and leading sales meetings. I was meeting with merchants. I was advising on products, and even worked hand in hand with design at times to deliver the best products to the customer. Because it's funny, what people don't understand about marketers or about people who build brands is that we are forced to be well-versed and know a lot, or as much as we can, about various departments. To be a good marketer, you have to understand how the consumer thinks, how a designer thinks, how a merchant thinks, so that when you are building creative campaigns, you can either marry back or you can provide the blueprint for these people to execute their jobs. Anyway, fast forward several jobs later, I'm reading T.D. Jakes' book, and it was like a light bulb. Wait, why can't I be a slasher? How is it that I started my career working with the slasher of slashers and never considered that for myself? It made me think, and it made me really take a inventory of where my mind was and why. Why is it that we are many times convinced or raised to believe that we can only be focused or specialized in one thing? Can it be because our parents, in many cases, in my case, engraved in us the mentality of go to school, do well, get a job, perform, keep a home, which again, no speaking poorly of them, they were doing what they were taught. And honestly, I speak for myself, and probably many of you were teaching us, or really looking out for us, looking out for me, so that I can have safety, so that I can not have need, so that I can, quote unquote, live this American dream. I know for me, the thought of actually dreaming, get that? So we're raised to live this American dream, get the job, do well, get promoted, get the house, send your kids to good schools, the white picket fence. But are we allowing ourselves to dream? So I know for me, the thought of dreaming or having a diverse portfolio, both career-wise, skill set-wise, let's not even mention financially, was not something that was discussed. Who knows your why? But I'm here to tell you, there is a slasher in all of us, whether you are fully in your pivot or on the brink or still questioning it. I'm here to remind you. Yes, you are listening to this podcast, and I am here to remind you what the mind can conceive, the mind can achieve. Let's get into today's topic, the slasher. No matter what you believed or were made to believe, And no matter what the circumstances in your life, you too are a slasher. There's so many reasons we may fear the desire to have various irons in the fire. Sometimes the thought of being great, can outweigh the thought of being good at many things. And that's if you happen to not be great at many things, which you are, so am I. So much potential out there. It is very possible. Some people feel strongly that, specializing in one area leads to deeper expertise and better outcomes. And, these are all words that you hear in corporate America. And you know what? Yes, to a degree, it does make you an expert in that one area. But many, if not all, and I'm just going to use CEOs. These are bosses of bosses. Many, if not all, successful CEOs have one thing in common. Besides what we discussed on the previous episode, having a sense of hesitation, a sense of fear when it comes to pivoting, when it comes to change, they all have one thing in common, and that is they know a little bit about every department. So for me in fashion, which is my wheelhouse, fashion and entertainment, over 20 something years in that space, my most liked by staff and employees and successful. Now we're talking numbers. Now we're talking business growth. Now we're talking, this is in the day and age of brick and mortar. Successful CEOs knew a lot or just enough about every department. And now we're talking sales, marketing, merchandising, production, logistics, warehouse, international, licensing, partnerships, brand partnerships, design. A good CEO knows a good amount or at least a little about every department. I've seen it. I've literally seen it. Don't think that spreading your focus across multiple disciplines will dilute your skills. As someone who has had teams, as someone who's been on teams, as someone who has had assistants and managers, and as someone who has had to report into CEOs, presidents of divisions, I'm always looking for someone who is, yes, an expert in what they are hired to do. So that's your job description, but also someone who goes the extra mile. And many times that involves various other departments. That involves knowing about various other areas, categories, avenues. That makes you an asset, 100%. And yes, tapping into your slasher mindset can be scary as hell. The anxiety and the fear that comes with venturing into something new, a new field, a new avenue can be daunting. And I know for me, it was paralyzing. But it's like anything that you do new in your life. It's like going on a date. It's like dating after being married for 20 years, which I've experienced. It's like having a baby. It's like your first child. It's like buying a home, buying your first car. When you make a change or a shift in life, it can be fearful, make you fearful. It can create anxiety. It can be, as I said, daunting. And I know for me, paralyzing. But why do we as people convince ourselves? Because as I've said, me too, I will put myself into the category of being afraid many, many times over. That since I found success in one area, branching out could lead to failure in another because God forbid I be good at many things. It's like the saying goes, jack of all trades, master of none. But what about jack of all trades, master of some? And on a bigger tip to growth, the ability to become a slasher, or a popular term that is now hot, is multi-hyphenate. The bonus of that, when you know a little bit about a lot, is also the ability to identify the experts in areas that you know only a little bit about. I'm going to repeat that because there's a lot of I know, you know in that statement. When you become a slasher, when you tap into your slasher, when you embrace the slasher, this multi-hyphenate, the bonus is that when you know a little or a lot about a lot of things, you also hone in and start to have this ability to identify those who are experts in their areas that you know only a little about. Meaning, a key to being a successful slasher multi-hyphenate is the ability to identify team members, to identify people you want to watch, people you want to observe. And I'm not only talking about in your intimate personal space. Let's go to who you follow on Instagram, on social media, what kind of podcasts you listen to, who do you watch on YouTube, who is feeding that space that is an expert in that space that you want to still continue to learn a little bit about. Before I stepped comfortably into my slasher mindset, I definitely suffered from, but who am I if I'm not this? In my case, being associated with someone famous, someone notable, someone who was a tastemaker or even a brand like Nike. Who am I if I'm not associated with these brands or these people? It was like my conversation piece. If I'm a lawyer, who am I if I'm not a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant or a surfer or an entertainer? You get what I'm saying? It could be hard, and it could get tricky when your profession is so closely tied to who you are, especially if you have invested a good amount of time, a significant amount of time into, I'll use lawyer, for example, into getting your law degree or a doctor, your medical degree, medical school, your residency, into cultivating any particular skill set or career. So who are you if you are not attached to these careers? That is something, as I mentioned, that I had to get over. There could absolutely be a struggle with the idea of redefining yourself or simply exploring different avenues when you have become accustomed being attached to I remember I was having a conversation with a girlfriend a few years ago, and this is right before I decided to leave Ellen. And I remember feeling like I knew exactly what I had to do. I knew that the environment wasn't for me. I knew that my relationship with my boss was never going to change. I knew that no matter what I did, it wasn't going to quote unquote be good enough. And there's tons of reasons that had nothing to do with my actual performance that were behind this. But it's like I knew that the result was me leaving, but all I can think about and all I was crippled with was, who am I if I'm not attached to this brand? Who am I if I'm not attached to Ellen DeGeneres? Who am I if I'm not connected? Or even deeper in a way, who am I if I'm not in the know anymore? If I'm not in an influential space? So that's definitely something that I had to struggle with, that I know can be a struggle for a lot of people if and when they're thinking of pivoting into a new profession or adding something to your portfolio. Don't even get me started on what I consider the biggest deterrent, or pardon my French or English, bullshit that will stop you from tapping into your full slasher mindset, especially now with social media and just simply the speed in which information and news travels. Comparing yourself to others, either their failures at their attempts or their ability to excel in their growth, both. I said both. Both observing someone fail and observing someone grow can cripple you and just make you stop developing, that new product, that new business, that bodega you want to open, that side hustle you've been thinking about, the pastry business you want to start. It's crazy because with the comparative mindset, seeing others excel in whatever areas they are in will lead to feeling inadequate. And it's like, why do we find ourselves thinking that way? Why is it that we believe in even bigger farce? Farce. I love that word. Farce. Untruth. Something that is not true. But why is it that we believe something even bigger? And that's the misconception, that you have to be extraordinary in a significant or specific area or avenue or business model to truly succeed. Why wouldn't that mindset discourage anyone from pursuing multiple interests? Of course it would. But the key and the goal and the work is in shifting out of this mindset. And that, my friends, is intentional work. It takes work. Sometimes lots and lots of shadow work. I know for me, tackling who I am without a celebrity attachment, as well as comparing myself to others' successes, was all ego work. It was chipping away. And I had to find myself having that inner dialogue. What is it about me, Rocio, that makes me feel like who I am is not good enough without this attachment? When really the work, the day-to-day, the deals, the negotiating, the pitching, the execution of contracts, the management of royalties, the execution of team building, creating processes and organization was all me. It was all me. It is all you. It is your intellectual property. It is the development. It is the systems you put in place. But what is it about the lack of no longer being attached to this thing that defines you professionally that can cripple you? So I had to have these inner conversations and these inner dialogues with myself. And as I said, shadow work can be ugly. Shadow work can bring to light a lot of things that you're like, damn, man, is this really ego-led? Is this really like, am I not going to have a conversation piece? And the truth is, yes. I do have some celebrity clients. I do still partake in some really cool activations. I still have really dope, amazing people in the space and friends. But when I tell you real talk, it's different. It is different when you own your own business. It is different when you're no longer in the day-to-day, when you're not in the nitty-gritty, when you're not on the calls, when you're not, on the photo shoot, when you're not in that space. It is absolutely different. But am I happier? Am I more fulfilled? Do I have the flexibility? Am I still eating the same? Am I still shopping the same? Am I still experiencing and traveling the same? 120%. And on top of that, I get to raise my daughter. I get to have that flexibility, which fulfills my personal goals. It's ironic that though I had the intimate exposure of working with key individuals who are, I would say, this generation's definition of slashers. I didn't allow my exposure to them to help me see that I too could be a slasher in my own right. There's so many times that we genuinely do not know our own potential, our own value in our own fields and in other fields because we don't see ourselves. We don't see ourselves outside of what we're doing from a day to day. We don't get to see ourselves as well in those fields. I know as a Latina, as a woman, coming up in the entertainment fashion space, very rarely did I ever encounter another Latina. The blessing for me was working for a Black-owned company. The blessing for me was being surrounded by brown people on a day-to-day when I started my career. But that landscape changed dramatically for me as I grew in my profession, as I grew title-wise, as I grew in my career. And I mean, don't get me wrong, people do it successfully. But how can you know that being a doctor is possible or a congressman is possible or an actor is possible? Like for real, for real. How can you know if these things are possible if you've never seen one that sounds like you or looks like you? If you primarily have only been in one certain or specific environment? You may not recognize the skills or the interest that could lead you to success in other areas. I was in it. I literally worked hand in hand with a rapper turned mogul, with a comedian turned brand business mogul. And I still didn't conceive that I too could. It's insane when I sit here and even saying it out loud and think about it. It's like, damn, even when you're in the space, you're so consumed with building, growing, and pouring in to someone else and having their brand's identity grow and their capital grow and their bank account grow. And I could not see it to myself. I had to have various mirror moments when I said to myself, I can do many things well. I can do many things well. I will not let these barriers stop me. I will try and I will fall on my cushioned ass if I need to. And when I call these are mirror moments. I don't know if you guys have seen Insecure, and it's the HBO show. And she has these moments where she looks in the mirror and it's either herself or it's either her pseudo personality. And it's usually encouraging her or talking her through a decision that she needs to make. And it's funny because before Issa was doing it, and I'm sure many of you have your methods, but I've always taken that moment to look in the mirror and look myself in the eye, which is crazy because a lot of times that's the hardest part. But I look myself in the eye and I remind myself of the bad bitch that I am. I remind myself of where God has brought me from. I remind myself that I've never been without. I remind myself that He'll never let me down. I remind myself that all will be well. And I have been through some shit. But what do we gain from wallowing into a corner and speaking negatively over ourselves? Absolutely nothing. So we've talked about why it can be a struggle to be a slasher. But now, the good part. Let's talk about why being a slasher can be incredibly beneficial to you professionally and personally, to your mind, your spirit, your body, and your health. And there are way, in my opinion, too many whys as to why tapping into your slasher mentality can be beneficial to you. But on this episode, let's dive into my top 3. So you've heard this saying, knowledge is power. Curiosity and the desire to know is always power as well. When you have a natural curiosity and a passion for learning, I'd say more about a variety of categories. This enthusiasm, this drive will drive you into learning and growing. What does curiosity, which leads many times to knowledge, lead to? When you put in the work, and I mean work, because one thing I will never deny is the fact that being a slasher, being an entrepreneur, being a multi-hyphenate, being someone who has a job and then a side hustle, being someone who juggles various things, one thing it definitely takes is work and time. For instance, it is 1 a.m. as I am recording this podcast. For the 1 to 40 new listeners that I have, am I tired? Hell yeah. Will I be up at 6:45 with a toddler? Absolutely. Will I get my workout on? Yes. Will I have calls and emails and responsibilities that live outside of this new venture of podcasting that I'm trying to add to my belt and public speaking? Yes. But what did the knowledge I have gathered from years and years of experience married with my curiosity of, will people be interested in what I have to say, fulfill? And I ask myself that because that is the purpose. That is what drives me to be up at 1 a.m. to record this. It fulfills a passion, my passion. It fulfills a small area of my intellectual property. I find joy in sharing what I know. I find joy in advising people. I find joy in learning. And in that, I fulfill a purpose. Fulfilling a purpose and satisfying the curiosity and the passion, top of being a slasher. But having a vast skill set, whether through jobs or through school or through a hobby, it creates a sense of adaptability. When you, from my experience, expose yourself to different fields, you become more confident. It's like an automatic thing. It's that saying of the more you know. And guess what? When people see how you start moving, what circles you start mingling in, and literally how you even walk into a room, it now makes you not only relatable, but inspirational. And that is because the mindset, the thoughts are now oh shit, she's just like me. He's just like me. She's where I'm from. She's doing her thing. He's killing the game, which may not be a motivator for you, or maybe it is, but I know for me, becoming not only relatable and not necessarily becoming, but maintaining the relatability while being inspirational is different, is very different from caring about what people think. It's a boost of confidence. It's a boost to the passion. It gives you additional drive and the motivation to keep going. I know that I sit on a lot of panels. I do a lot of speaking engagements, and it is so fulfilling to me. Last year, I spoke at a college to a young group of Latinos, and it's so nice that, even sometimes you sit there, you're just talking about your experience, you're talking about the way you think, you're talking about how you feel. And to have people come up to you after you speak, take the time to come up to you to just thank you for coming, thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing your experience and what you know. How could you not be motivated to continue? How could you not be motivated to want more? And how could you not be motivated to be and continue to strive to be an example? Tapping into your slasher will automatically create a growth mindset. And people with a growth mindset view challenges as opportunities for more, to develop, to be great, to be more. It's like we believe that our abilities can be cultivated with lots of hard work. Like when you become a slasher, when you tap into that slasher mindset, you're like, you know what? I could really do this. I just got to work hard. I got to be better. I got to be more observant. Remember, I'm just going to circle back to what I said at the beginning of the podcast. What the mind can conceive, the mind can achieve. What the mind can conceive, the mind can achieve. It is a broad statement, but it is so true. What the mind can conceive, the mind can achieve. Does it take work? Absolutely. Does it take time? 100%. But we're literally watching this happen right in front of us minute by minute. I mentioned the new president-elect, Donald Trump. He literally went from a celebrity to president, which is the most powerful seat in the world. Talk about Jake Paul. He's about to fight Mike Tyson. This kid went from posting on YouTube to being a multimillionaire to developing or further honing in on his passion for boxing. And now he is fighting a champion on Netflix. There's influencers, there's motivational speakers that, it's funny because even on this podcast, I'm not saying anything you don't know. And a lot of times, most motivational speakers like Tony Robbins and a few others, they're not saying anything that usually we don't know. But they present themselves. I hope to present myself with such motivation and such certainty and such confidence that you take what I'm saying, even if it's just one of you, and you're like, you know what? Damn, I got to tap into this slasher mentality. So you tell me, you think these people are going to stop diversifying their portfolios anytime soon? Hell no. What do you think allowed people like Russell Simmons and Puff, P. Diddy, and Jay-Z to believe that they can have multi-business ventures? I mean, they were literally, Russell Simmons was a hip-hop executive, and Puff and Jay were performers. They're rappers, literally rappers to moguls. It was the mindset, the growth mindset, the slasher mindset of not being trapped to one thing. I am here, if anything, to remind you that you are no different, my friend. I am no different. Yes, you, yes, me. I will warn you, once you step into your slasher, the possibilities are endless. Will everything be a success? Absolutely not. Every venture may not work, but pursuing new interests with boldness and confidence, win or lose, I guarantee you will reinforce the mindset that you too can try, you too can succeed. Something new, something fresh. I mean, why the fuck not? But by the way, let's not forget a very important fact. that though this is not a finance podcast, I will always do my best to help you look out for your paper, that bank account. Let's not forget that becoming a slasher, that adding a division, that becoming a multi-business, that having a side hustle, that exploring and embracing a vast range of interests can lead to not only, okay, cool, rich experiences, yes, personal fulfillment, check, and possibly the most important, which isn't always the most important, but fuck, it counts. More money in your bank account. Bueno, mi gente, I hope these practical tools and takeaways provide value to those looking to enhance their ability to balance their lives effectively. Basically, I hope what I said you listened to. I hope you took a note or two. I hope I encouraged you. My goal on this podcast, you know I'm Latina, so I speak fast, and I committed to being myself. But my goal on this podcast will always be to empower you with actionable strategies to achieve a more balanced and fulfilling life experience. That, my friends, is definitely written down. As always, please remember life is made of a zillion small moments. Stop waiting for a big crescendo. It can lead to fatigue and overwhelming failure. Start one step at a time, sis. Bruh. Just start one step at a time. Just start, period. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I hope you feel encouraged. I hope you feel like you can do anything. And above all, I hope you feel loved. I love you. Have an amazing day.
Thank you for listening to My Mommy's podcast. We hope you enjoy. Make sure to follow, share, and subscribe. Sophie Robinson on this episode and Rocio Cash, the owner of the Pivot. Love you. Peace out.